Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're at episode 403. Now, two guests today, Sophie Maloney, Sky TV. Welcome along, Sophie.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And Bear Lu, who's just come back from China.
Yeah, it's my first time here, and thank you, Paul, to have me. Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you both on the show. Sophie, maybe you could just fill guests in sort of where you fit into the big wide world of Sky, because there's a, I guess it's fair to say a reasonable number of people at Sky TV here, and lots of different roles. But what's your role?
So look, my role is general counsel. That means that I'm the lead lawyer for the company, trying to protect them and protect and serve, I like to say. And yeah, there are over 1,000 employees at Sky TV. I joined in January this year, having been away in the UK and the Middle East for close to 19 years. So with Sky UK first of all, and then we moved to the Middle East, got to launch a news channel, had some fun over there. And I was previously with OSN, which is another pay TV company based out of Dubai. And a key part of my role there was content protection. Okay. So, the opportunity to bring our boys home and the Sky role was something I couldn't stand in the way of. And, we're really excited to be back. It's obviously a challenging time in the media landscape. So for me, it was a great time to get back and be part of the Sky team.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining the show. Looking forward to diving in and chatting a bit more about what's happening in the Sky world during the show.
Thank you.
And Bear, we just met up. Would have been probably a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you've been podcasting in China, and then you moved to New Zealand and working in the tech world here. Mm-hmm. What else should we know about you?
Yeah. Hi guys, my name is Bear Liu, and as Paul said, I'm a podcaster, which is challenging. But I found moving to a new country is more challenge than that. So I moved to New Zealand two years ago with my family. I used to be a UX and UI designer in China, which involves a lot of iOS apps developing program. So, but now I work for a health supplement and beauty e-commerce company in New Zealand, and in charge of marketing. So, which is a totally different career path. So yeah, it's actually a long story for my poor English. So I just make it short. Yeah, and the other thing which about me is I'm a podcaster in China for almost 6 years.
A highly awarded podcaster.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just I'm trying to do my best, and I started my podcast Bear Talk in 2012, and now it's just released 288 episodes.
Congratulations.
So yeah, but not as good as you. So
you already stop it! You've got a much bigger audience than
400
than we have. So that's good. Well, looking forward to chatting a little bit more, and in future, sort of gaining some more perspectives on China.
Yeah.
And I think often we sort of look into China with an outside perspective, but don't really understand all the perspectives. So it's kind of really nice to be able to draw into some of your perspectives on some of these topics.
Yeah. It's
so let's jump in now. There's always lots of news to chat through. We've tried to keep it reasonably short so we can dive in and talk a little bit about China and about Sky. Yep. But first up was a story that one of the team here at Gorilla had mentioned to me that was in the media. Craig Harris, who's been on the show before, passed this one on. And look, it's a situation where we've got apparently some sort of a name suppression issue that's been picked up. And actually, the interesting interesting situation is that this is sort of a bit of a technology crossover. into name suppression issues. And I guess we're aware in the past that sometimes courts have insisted that somebody's name be suppressed in a particular case, and then using whatever mechanisms that information has leaked out anyway, even though maybe the mainstream media haven't covered it. In this case, the scenario that we were alerted to is basically one where you've got two defendants, and one was suggested one should have name suppression, the other should have the name suppression lifted. And I guess the request was that actually they should both stay suppressed, because if one name got released, then by searching for that person, actually people would be able to figure out who the other person was because of what some of the search results were. Which is kind of an interesting scenario. We haven't seen anything quite like this before, but we've certainly seen names leaked when the judge says that they shouldn't, and then other things that sort of get passed round through sort of online back channels, shall we say?
And where was this? Where was the court order or the suppression?
So this is a New Zealand case. Now the link that I originally had seems to have broken, so I'm just trying to find the full details on it. But this was a New Zealand New Zealand situation, and I guess we don't have too much control here over what Google doesn't show.
No, that's true. I mean, that's the thing about the laws. They govern the country, so all of the media here might play ball, but the search results that Google, and because of the intelligence that sits behind that search engine, which is great and makes all of our lives, much easier in many ways, it does create these other moments. And hopefully we might come on to the piracy story, because that's one of our issues, is that actually when you start to search for things, the autocomplete and the power of that search engine will immediately lead you to places that, legitimate service providers don't think you should be. And I think the name suppression one is quite interesting. You're right, because they search on one and up pumps the other name. So I think it's a really interesting way of managing kind of traditional legal means and media with these global tech giants and the power of those search engines.
I imagine, Bear, in China this will be different, because the search engines and what happens online there is much more regulated from a government perspective, right? So if the government felt that there shouldn't be a result that was being shown, then they have a lot more control than we tend to have in most other parts of the world.
Yeah, I think it's on two sides. We on the first layer, we thought China government controls all the informations of internet in China, which actually is quite true, because any sensitive political informations will be reviewed by the government first. But now on the second layer is that people in China is already know there are two things on internet. So if you try to search with Google or with other search engine outside China, you will find totally different result. So
or that they're blocked entirely.
So it's just like in China, like Baidu. It's a search engine in China, and they will try to change their way of display to make sure that the top result is selected by some purpose. But I think from a technology perspective, maybe the name suppression is hard in internet age, but it could be easier in the blockchain age, because later when we adapt blockchain, the whole internet will move it into another level. So all the things are decentralized. So it could be a better future for us. But right now it's just you have to get used to the real thing, the real world.
It's interesting you talk about blockchain, because I've been asked about that before in the the anti-piracy content protection space, and people seem to think it might have legs, but I don't have the technical expertise. But I'm really interested when you talk about the censorship piece, whether you've had any issues with podcasting with the topics you're covering, or maybe it's not as full on as that in China.
I think it's in podcast
just wondering if you've ever had any issues, or you've done podcasts and people maybe if they've got this kind of oversight in China, I wonder if it creates any moments, or
have you had the military police turn up after you recorded a podcast, Bear?
Yeah, I'm trying not to to get involved to that scenario. But that's kind of it's also when I'm doing podcasting. There are some sites they will use my audio content and without permission from me. But as a personal podcast, I don't have ability and time to stop it, and which I think probably it's also not that bad for me, because get more people to.
And you distribute it free anyway, right? So if somebody else redistributes your podcast, although you would prefer to control that, it's not quite the same. Although it's sort of copyright to you, it's not the same as though you were making a living based on every person that listened.
It's of course podcast content. I think it's just for free, and the only thing that concerns I have concerns about it is I don't have any traffic or analytics about the audience, who the feedbacks from them. And if I'm doing something some content for commercial, like if I sell some webinars or online courses, and it will be I will become very curious or serious about the piracy.
You want to know the stats for every download, and so if somebody else is copying it, distributing it through another mechanism, you don't actually know how big your own audience is, and so
that's
on.
true.
That's really interesting. And talking of podcasting in China, and even here, because I imagine you want to keep going back to China. Do is there a level of sort of caution that you have to carry with you when you're talking on a podcast while you're in China, or even here, where you would just think through what perspectives that you share, knowing that anybody could be listening into the content? Is that something that would go through your mind, or go through minds of others that when they're communicating publicly? Is that the reality? You just have to sort of filter what you're saying to consider. There might be some things that you would discuss quietly one-on-one with somebody in a private context that you can't do on a podcast. Would that be?
Actually, it's everyone has to think about what they are saying in China publicly. Just got a filter in mind about everything about politics, or if the topic is quite sensitive, so people will choose not to talk about it publicly. It might get them in trouble. So as a podcaster, of course, and I found it's quite limit our ability to express.
Right. So here in New Zealand, we talk about freedom of speech has been debated, recently with some really extreme views, and I guess now we're in a world where what's said, it might not be that the government comes down on you, but there's certainly a lot of public opinion if you say something that a lot of people don't agree with. But you've got the broader extent of the role the government plays in there as well, right?
Different pressure.
It's a changing world. Okay, now, and the next thing we had was Huawei and ZTE, who have been banned from supplying technology for Australia's new mobile network. So we're expecting to see a 5G mobile network get established in Australia, likely ahead of us here in New Zealand. They're talking 2019 for that, and we've got Spark and Vodafone sort of talking about 2020 here. But the big difference between Australia and New Zealand is here in New Zealand, Huawei, for instance, have a lot of network infrastructure within New Zealand already. And there's I haven't heard any suggestions about sort of limiting the involvement of Chinese companies in New Zealand's networks. Although I know that there are I hear comments from time to time from varying channels where people feel that we should. But in Australia it seems as though they're looking to draw a reasonably hard line to block out Huawei and ZTE from being involved in this new 5th generation mobile network.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? Because I understand that one of the reasons for this is legislation in China that requires, I guess, local companies to, potentially release, information. But in New Zealand, we have a look at our networks here. Our mobile providers, and look, they're forced to also, share certain information. If there's a court assigned requirement or a police request to capture a text message, something like that, and these are being used quite legitimately to, I guess, prosecute people in the past who, most people in New Zealand would agree probably, should have been prosecuted, murder type situations and so on. So, I mean, they're probably quite different in these two cases, but how do you feel, as Chinese person around this sort of, these barriers sort of being put up to Chinese companies, and we've seen sort of similar things happening, in the US, particularly under the current government, regime under Trump, where things have been sort of, much harder for Russian and Chinese companies to do business in certain areas of the tech sector.
So as a Chinese, I think to talk about this topic, we have to answer two questions. First is, what is 5th generation, the 5th generation, the 5G? What's that? What that means? Why it is so important that that Australian government banned it from Chinese companies, and the second question is, why Australia? So it's these two questions are quite interesting. First, I did some. I know nothing about 5G at first. So, but then I read some articles and find it's not just as 3G to 4G, just faster and more bandwidth. It's not as simple as that. So it's basically about if we adapt 5G, machine can talk to machine. So it's like the machine could be a requester to request data directly from machine, not human-machine interaction, which means take Tesla car, for example. Now they have heaps of sensors all around their car. So while they are doing auto driving, if there are people or other cars, they will detect environment. But it's just based on sensor. So with 5G, that means the other car could have 5G, and they can talk to each other. So this car could know the speed of that car, and it could avoid traffic accident, and could improve our lives in a fundamentally way. And it's just one case. So I think that's why all the countries like US, UK, Canada, Australia, China, Japan, they are Korea, they are all quite keen to get a place in 5G. It's quite competitive. So this is from a technology perspective. But the second thing is why Australia? Because Australia, the Prime Minister of Australia, he's quite I don't know how to say that in English, but in China, everyone said he's ridiculous, because last year he said something in Chinese publicly, that which Chairman Mao said years ago, decades ago, when China established their government in 1945, that 中国人民从此站起来了, which means Chinese people now stand up. And the Prime Minister of Australia, he said it in Chinese, that Australian now stand up. So this quite, I think it's just about politics, so political reason. But all the political reason, in my perspective, are the source of it are economy. So all about money. So
yeah, that's all. I mean, it always plays a big part in it. The other thing with the 5G networks is we expect there to be much more sort of smarts or computer processing that actually happens sort of towards the edges of the network, or sort of really inside the network, rather than people using the network to get to a particular server or a particular place. That we'll have a lot that actually operates sort of within the realms of the network. So there's some quite interesting changes from that perspective. Sophie,
I mean, I suppose I have to land back to where I am and what I know, and just think about any technology has the ability to communicate cross borders, and it comes down to the contractual arrangements. There's good old-fashioned trust, and I think that to try and block companies that have great technology because of an underlying political or otherwise fear, I'm not sure that's the best way to necessarily manage it. So I don't think it's a particular problem that New Zealand has Huawei and we have this network infrastructure here, because I suppose I kind of trust the way the contracts work and the way the system works to protect us, and I suppose how much value is there in that. So I find it a really interesting approach by the Australian government. It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds as well.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly going to be an impact for them when they have to exclude the Chinese companies, and we've only got to look at our ultra fast broadband versus what Australia has, and they've taken a very, very different approach. But in terms of the amount of the billions and billions and billions that they're sort of pouring into delivering something that is pretty disappointing compared to what we have here in New Zealand. And you wonder whether this decision may really sort of stifle innovation, or at least push up what they end up having to throw at it in terms of investment. So it's a
and is it a real
interesting one to watch, right?
Exactly.
Will their mobile networks in the future be as poor as their broadband is today because of this decision? Well, probably not, but there will be some impact, and whether it's a small impact or a large one, that's something I guess we'll see over time. But if you were to ask 10 years ago, how do we think New Zealand will be in our sort of broadband compared to Australia? I don't think there would have been too many people would have predicted just how different they are. Now, a few other things I just want to have a quick chat about. Microsoft Surface Go, that has just launched in New Zealand today, or they've had a sort of a launch event for that. Very interesting to see, because Microsoft have had got various their various tablets, their Surface Pro product and their Surface Books have been pretty popular out there, and multi-billion-dollar business for them, but they haven't really had anything that sort of I guess competes with some of the lower cost, or the lower cost iPads. They got I guess emulated with Apple's iPad Pro to some degrees. You could say, with the snap-on keyboard and the stylus, which wasn't something we had sort of expected Apple to do. But now Microsoft have brought this down to a much lower price point, so starting at around $700 in New Zealand, and then you pay for your accessories, for your keyboard and your stylus. So it does build up. But look, I had a play with one of them today. And it looks and feels like quite a responsive device. They seem to be putting a really big push into the education market with this as something to be used in schools. And I think the skew here in New Zealand is very much towards Google for the technology that's used in our schools, towards the Google Cloud. Microsoft were a bit slow there in the education sector, and there's certainly a chunk of schools that are using Microsoft Cloud as well. But it's, I guess, likely here to be those schools that are already in the Microsoft direction that would be looking at this. But I can also see a number of other uses for a tablet that's a bit lower cost, a little bit smaller, and probably not able to replicate everything that your main computer will do, but as an extra sort of device, which tends to be how people use their iPads and their iPad Pros. There aren't too many people that would use an iPad Pro in the same way people use a Surface Pro as their entire computer. But this seems like a reasonably smart move.
Sounds good. Anything that runs Word and is light touch and things. I've obviously got an Apple in front of me today, the Pro, but I think that sounds ideal. I've got 2 9-year-olds who in the next couple of years are going to need to get access, and actually the school they're at is Microsoft. So,
right. Yep.
And you're right, the laptop prices weren't that compelling, to be honest. The Google Docs and that option was much cheaper, but they'd run out. We're a bit late. So I think that sounds quite exciting, and something that's light touch, and hopefully I can get a super strong case around it so it won't break too easy. Sounds positive.
Yeah, that's nice. Bear, have you followed the Surface products? What's your thoughts?
No, to be honest, because I'm a typical Apple guy, iPhone, MacBook, and iPad, something like that. So I'm not quite familiar with Surface, but I think it's always good to have more options. So it's make it with a good competition for that. So if it just all you can choose is iPad, it's just make Apple become more lazy about new product developing. So which is now they are doing not as good as they are a few years ago. So I think that's good. We can have more options for that. No, I think it's good move on Microsoft's part. And look, some of their lower end Surface products before haven't performed very well. This has what called the chip in it is called a Pentium Gold, which is a reasonably obscure chip, but it is it's lower power, so you can get plenty of battery life. But it's certainly not sort of the sort of power that you might expect in a professional product. It's it's a step down, but probably quite suitable for lots of basic uses, and seemed pretty snappy, the one I tried out today. Other gadgets, just to cover off, the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. I've had a good couple of weeks use of that, and to put a little video online about it last week. I guess for me this is very much sort of a productivity device. It's got all the things that people are used to from Samsung's Galaxy S9, which is a really, really nice phone. But you just then add on that sort of convenience of the stylus, and you can use that for even because it's Bluetooth now, you can use it to remotely trigger a selfie or a photo, and you can use it to advance forward PowerPoint slides. So you can use it as sort of clicker if you link it into a projector and you want to run PowerPoints or whatever other presentation program. Then you can do that off the phone.
And the other bit, as well as a crazy amount of storage you've got that option for a 0.5 terabyte of built-in storage, and you can upgrade it to a full terabyte. Is that you can just link it up to a big screen and use it as a PC of sorts if you hook in the keyboard and mouse, and that seems to work pretty well. So I used that the other day. I sort of forced myself to not use my laptop and just use that. And look, there are limitations. There are things where you've got to get workarounds and things that are different. But for those scenarios where you don't have your full device with you, it's kind of nice to be able to do
and you said it charges super fast as well. Is that
charge it. Well, it's got wireless charging. Yeah. It's got fast charging. It's got a big battery, so you get long battery life out of it as well. The only sneaky thing was that they are releasing dual SIM versions in some parts of the world, but we again miss out on that sort of stuff here because of our telcos. But for those that are very keen on that, I'm sure there will be a route through which you can find that with parallel imported models and so on. But look, overall, a very nice piece of technology. And then the other gadgets that have sort of come onto my radar in the last few days were DJI with their Mavic 2 and their I guess their sort of closest competitor in the drone space, another Chinese company, Unique, YUNEEC, for those who are not familiar with them. They announced a drone last week that looked like it potentially could be quite a worthy competitor to DJI's Mavic and Mavic 2. What's the other one? Mavic Pro, I think. And the standout for it was it had much longer battery life. A lot of these drones are sort of around 15 minutes, and so they were announcing their one was about 30 minutes. So it seemed really good. But the one thing that this new one from Unique, the Mantis Q, doesn't have, that DJI have, is the sort of collision detection. And so I don't know about anyone else, but when I try and fly one of these things, there's a pretty good chance that if it's near a tree or near something that it can hit, then I'll probably hit it. So and
does it warn you and it disables it, or you still have to navigate it?
Well,
to the ground?
Unique one doesn't sort of have the smarts to do that collision avoidance sort of at all, or maybe if there are a couple of drones, I don't know how good its detection gets on smaller things, but but I guess what's happened that sort of made up my mind, because I was thinking, maybe I should buy one of these Unique ones. We'll have to see what DJI come out with. Well, they've announced and launched their new Mavic 2. Well, it has sort of similar battery life, around the half an hour, but it has the collision detection and so on. Yes, it's quite a chunk more, but I think I'd probably step up to get the Mavic 2, so that I'm less likely to.
Is it on your
Christmas
list? Do you think, Paul?
I think it could be. Yeah.
Note to all listeners. Yeah.
I think it's two different market. I think. Yeah. So DJI, they just aim for professional customers, and their products with a high definition camera and really high quality and long-standing battery. But the other one, Unique Mantis, I think it's especially for Asian market is quite a smart move. Of course, all Asian countries, we are crazy about selfie, including India, Japan, Korea, China.
I think it's global.
It's just like everyone, every girl and every boys. All the most common things you seeing on the street, they are doing selfie. So this could be a new way, a cooler way to do a selfie with a drone. So
right, because the Unique Mantis Q has this ability to control it through yelling, waving, smiling, whatever. It's got a number of detections. I don't know whether that voice control works through the remote, or because drones can make a bit of noise and also get a long way away from you. So that's kind of curious to have that voice control element to it, the ability to sort of wave and trigger videos and having these things sort of follow you. There's some quite nice capabilities, aren't there? So if you are, I guess, in the market, it's worth having a look at the latest from both companies. Now, Sophie, on to Sky. So I'm kind of curious because look, there are lots of things that we could have talked about to do with Sky, where your technology's going, and so on, and
all in the right direction. Paul, there you go.
And but it was suggested that the first person we need to talk to was you, Sophie. So you're the very first person from Sky TV to come on the New Zealand Tech Podcast.
I'm very excited to be here. I don't have tech in my title, but you never know. Could be something in the future.
Yeah, so I'm keen to sort of hear what it is that's got you excited about Sky, and really talk us through the importance of your role and obviously the things that have been going on. We've heard about in the media recently in terms of Sky taking on those that have been selling little boxes to try and access Sky without paying.
Yeah.
And you've obviously had some success in the courts there, and why you think that's so important.
Well, look, it's my pleasure to be here. I am here to predominantly talk about content protection. Why? Because I love content, right? I think it's one of life's joys. I think we should celebrate it. But actually, it takes a huge amount of effort to make great content. So there's a lovely stat around Game of Thrones, one of the most pirated shows on the planet. But from the page to the screen, they talk about 3,589 people being involved in that process. Now, that's a tremendous number of roles, and I think people tend to think about piracy, it doesn't really matter, it's just me sitting at home, it's a simple click of my finger, victimless crime, it's only Hollywood studios. Well, actually it's not. It's all of those people who are involved. So, and actually it's not just about movies or TV series. It actually impacts one of our prized possessions in New Zealand, whether you like rugby or not. This actually does impact our codes as well. So I'm here to talk about that on behalf of Sky, but also because personally I really care about it. And I do think there needs to be a conversation in New Zealand about this. But the Fibre TV decision, which came from the Christchurch District Court recently, was about these little Kodi boxes, which is just a little box that plugs into your TV. And they were sold on the basis that, buy this, don't pay for content ever again. Content will be free. And I do feel bad for people because they actually paid over $350.
And those boxes, when you look at the tech that's inside of them, are worth a fraction of that, right? In terms of the actual box, right? And recently I've been using a little. This was the Amazon Fire TV stick, and look, that thing's $30 US. Does a similar, it's got similar technology in it. Fraction of the price, and so there's been I guess a number of parties that are basically pocketing a whole lot of money for for selling you something that's worth a fraction of the price.
And so people were misled, right? So the District Court said Fair Trading Act, consumers shouldn't be misled. They shouldn't have been selling this. So look, we're excited about that decision, and I suppose that was Sky looking at what it could do onshore. We talked about kind of how the local laws work. The next step for us is to think about, these pirate sites that you're talking about, who go and steal the content, that's what it is. They're based offshore. They're both based in different jurisdictions, servers all over the place. So your traditional legal means of going to court isn't going to work. So, the next step for us is to look towards site blocking. Now, late last year, there were obviously some conversations in the press, I don't know if people realise, and that was Sky starting to have the conversation, but with service providers, because actually they're key, because they're going to help give effect to this. Site blocking is about a court-ordered process where you prove that sites like the Pirate Bay are not set up for any other purpose than to sell stolen content. You know, it's a great business model if you can do that. Give it away, and they make all the ad revenues from it. So, you know, that's been an important thing for us to start to look at, to work with our colleagues. You talked about the telcos. They're the ones who can effectively give effect to this. They're not in any way in the wrong, but they're the ones who can actually, when I search for the Pirate Bay, up pops a page that says, hey, you're not able to access the site because actually it's giving away stolen content. That's what it is. It's not about blocking the internet. It's not about censoring. It's just about that type of conversation. And we think it's really important because, and I will give you a little personal anecdote from the weekend, Paul.
Yep.
Watching the rugby at some friend's place, and you know, they can afford to pay for TV and things. They have means. And we got into a conversation about what movies are you watching. And even though they do have Sky in the home, the comment was made, no, I'm not pirating. I'm using Putlocker. Now, Putlocker is one of these sites, torrent sites, and they're giving away stolen content. They're making ad revenue from it. And the only people who are benefiting are those criminal networks offshore. So that's why we think it's important going forward that we're going to look at site blocking again, ideally in collaboration with the ISPs, and that's a process we're going through at the moment. Yeah.
So just stepping back to the Cody boxes, because really, you know, I don't think sort of, you know, publicly they'd had a lot of attention in the media until Sky started sort of, you know, taking these things to court and and putting out press releases, whereas now I think, you know, the name Cody box has probably, you know, become much more well known. But, you know, because of that. So that is quite an interesting dilemma on your part. And I sort of, you know, wonder when some of these things sort of go to court and get that attention, whether it has a side effect of actually promoting these mechanisms, you know, maybe much more broadly. You know, I totally, you know, understand what you're saying around, like, you know, the false claims and so on. But how do you weigh that? How do you weigh that side up and decide should we just let this go on because not causing too much harm? I mean, I guess in the case of was it a couple of different
so I think
companies that were selling these? They were claiming some pretty big numbers too, right? So was that one of the key triggers for you? Because at what point do you decide, you know, it's worth pursuing this particular thing, or, you know, somebody's you know, maybe holding their phone to their TV for a stream that other people are paying $50 to see, and then they're sharing it onto, you know, Facebook and so on? Because that was another one where, you know, there's sort of a feeling of, well, I wouldn't have thought of looking on, you know, Facebook, or a lot of people wouldn't have thought of looking on Facebook for streams. But once it was in the media that, oh, Sky's going after people for this, everyone jumps on Facebook and says, oh, well, we don't have to pay Sky because we've heard all this coverage that we can watch it free on Facebook.
Well, I think you're right. It is part of the challenge. And actually, the objective here wasn't about going after the individuals. It was about these, you know, the MyBox case in particular, and I obviously wasn't there when the decisions were made, but there were outrageous claims being made around, and, you know, the numbers that they're selling. So you can't sit back. And also we knew that consumers were going to be misled. These boxes now, we've been trying to do a demo in the office. It's very challenging because there's been so much disruption offshore of these, you know, these preloaded boxes. So the sites that they track to, they're no longer tracking to, so people actually aren't able to see the content.
So you bought a box and you can't get your free Sky TV.
Correct.
Disappointing.
So I think that actually, from my perspective, and I did this in my prior role, this is a bigger conversation than Sky. It's a much bigger conversation because it's about, of course, value. And I just don't think we can readily accept the normalisation of what is theft or engaging in it, even though it's very easy and it's at home and it's a simple click. So actually that's where the education, informing and comms piece is absolutely critical, because it does come down to consumer choice.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's so many aspects to this discussion, and, you know, a couple of things that well, you know, one of the things that, you know, often comes up is, look, if you know, if it was just easier to access this content in a legitimate way, then we would pay for it, right? I mean, I hear that so many people that I talk to. And look, for me, I know enough people that have been involved in or are involved in the production of music and TV and film and so on to feel as though, look, I'm gonna back these people by paying for content where I can pay for it. And so, look, on this one, I probably do stand a bit more on Sky's side than I would have on some other discussions to do with Sky from time to time.
But there are lots of great services, right?
Yeah, and
that are cost effective.
Look, it's I guess it has got easier to get content in New Zealand than what it used to be. And I know certainly when we had these discussions a few years ago, we didn't have Netflix in New Zealand, we didn't have Neon, we didn't have many choices at all. Whereas now we've got Lightbox that you're promoting now. Thank you.
Look, I'm on the side of content protection, so that means celebrating all of the legal services however you consume them. So, and that they are reasonably priced.
Yeah.
Going forward with the new platform that Sky is going to be launching in the new year, in the next 6 to 12 months, I think the time frame is the Cisco Infinite Video Platform. Some marketeer needs to come up with a better name potentially, but it is about making sure it's really easy for consumers.
Yeah.
Whatever the content is they want to watch, to put it onto that one platform. And I suppose the other aspect is you can trust these platforms. You can trust that the content's being curated because we're subject to New Zealand laws, and you can trust that when you're watching it, you're not bringing any kind of malware into your home. And I think this is the other part of the conversation.
That doesn't get raised very often,
but
I
think
it's
know about.
as a really good one, that people wandering over into some sort of darker places on the net looking for content,
right?
can get sucked into all sorts of issues from a security standpoint. So that's a fair one. I guess there's also the aspect though of for those that are comfortable with accessing content through these sorts of mechanisms, that it just puts you more offside with a group who are going to shake their fists even more at Sky TV. So there's just an element of upsetting people and pissing them off because of that you're going out and trying to block things, and we know you can't entirely block anything and shut it down, right? So, but you think it's worth doing?
We do think it's worth doing because the overseas experience says, the results are impressive. You're absolutely right. There's a spectrum. There are the people who will always circumvent and will say, the internet needs to be free. You're right. Site blocking in that context isn't going to work for them. But actually, for a big majority of people, some of whom don't know that they're actually looking at pirated content, we think it is a really important tool. It's used in over 42 countries in the world. And in Australia, the recent review they've seen that actually visits to the key pirate sites has dropped by 50%. So it's quite impressive stats by quite a simple measure that we're hoping won't be troublesome for our ISPs to implement. And and we do think actually, this is an important conversation to be having. And we're having it with our broadcast colleagues. So, at TVNZ and at MediaWorks, also with Spark. So it's an ongoing conversation and we think it's really important. So that's why we're going to lead the charge on it.
So what's next?
What's next? Well, actually, there is some really interesting research I just want to pick up on that we looked at how many people are pirating, and just on this site blocking point, of those who admit to being regular pirates, 44% of them say they would still support some form of blocking because actually more should be done. They kind of know it's not fair. And, there is still, piracy is still very prevalent. And a lot of people are doing it, some of them unwittingly, others knowingly. One of the stats that we've come up with, which is deeply concerning, is 8% of New Zealanders are regularly pirating live sports streams. So it's 300,000 people who sort of think, oh, well, that's fine. And I suppose our overall message on that is, hey, stop for a moment. And I'm not just talking about Sky's bottom line, I'm just talking about the talent, the people involved in this industry. It takes time, it takes effort, and it does take investment. So we're hoping that Kiwis want to play fair.
But doesn't that just cater to different people at different points. Like if we were chatting before we started, I think about iFlix in Asia, who've got a Netflix or a Neon-like sort of service.
Yep.
That's a fraction of the price because you've got the economies in some of these countries, Indonesia and so on, aren't such that people would ever pay what we pay for sort of streaming. So. Isn't there an aspect of for those who maybe can't afford to pay the full price of Sky or something that this gives them a sort of a way of being on a more level playing field so that they can still watch sport even though they don't have the money in their pocket because they're struggling just to feed their families.
I do. I understand that those economic drivers, and they're really challenging. I'm not going to say that's easy to solve. One little plug. So FanPass, which is our online sport product, is now on mobile. It's just under $16 a month. So we think that that's quite a big shift. Yes, it's the smaller screen. It's probably on the
sort of crouching around your.
Well, you'll be surprised in my household. We all seem to.
Handset.
No, I understand. So look, those things, but we do think there are a bigger tranche of the population at the moment who we need to have a conversation with. And so that's why the comms piece, you played our new virtual reality game, Copycat Combat. It's just about engaging the public. It's not about taking people to court. And we're going to be taking that around schools and to sports clubs and getting people to play so we can talk to them. And Bear, I think you got more points than Paul on the game before this podcast. So well done.
Yeah.
Does that,
You're a better content protector.
Yeah, we had a VR game before we started podcasting today. Just
it's warm up.
Exactly.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Look, I think there's lots that we can talk about on this. Look, what I really appreciate is that Sky is certainly communicating. I think a bit more now with. I guess the community on some of these things, and I hope that will continue. There's obviously other discussions to have around where the technology is going, and we'll look forward to having some further chats with some others within sort of Sky on some of those aspects.
Sounds good, and the feedback from your community is important because actually that's how we get better. So thank you for letting me share some of those thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's good. You raised some good things. Were there anything that you wanted to add to that discussion, Bear?
Yeah. It's just like while you are talking, I'm thinking about piracy and same thing in China, and like Game of Thrones and other American TV shows, which is also quite popular in China, even though there are no official products in China. So based on piracy and a subtitle group, which helped a lot to translate all the subtitle for from English to Chinese, so that China audience can understand what they are talking about. And they are so developed that now for Game of Thrones, when releasing in America, maybe just a few hours later, there will be a high definition version, and you can download from China. But I noticed that, which Sophie said, one point is very important, that you might got something illegal from that content. Even that content is originally legal. Let's give an example that Game of Thrones, when they release it from the piracy website, the first version of that content will add something, will guide you to some gambling website or other illegal website, and it's probably will you may lost a lot of money, or security problems, will something like that. And you don't know if there are some frames they will add something. So there are some. It's kind of like you don't know, because before that I've heard a girl download some romance TV shows and watch that, and during while she's watching, she was some horrible frame.
So they splice some other
yeah,
content through. You're right.
It's like a practical joke or something, but it's really feels not good. Yeah, and I think
so that sort of control sort of gets lost, doesn't it? When and you've got no sort of point where you can go back to address that when it's it's just being coming through those channels.
The criminals don't care what you're watching, right?
So I think people, if there are accountable provider and with not cheaper, just reasonable price, people will willing to pay that money for the good content. But the other issue I'm thinking about is at this age, the boundary between consumer and creator is blurring. So it's like in media industries, this is probably not a big issue because the content are created by professional groups of people, so with a large budget of money, but for other individual creators, it's quite tricky to deal with piracy, and it's kind of like it's developing too fast to catch up, to take on. So yeah,
it's quite an interesting thought, because I think we usually think of piracy and its impact on big media organizations, nameless, faceless corporations that that are a million miles away, and we don't know anybody that works for them, and we certainly wouldn't have those people sitting across the room in our podcast or hang out and chat to them at all. But when it's your mate that's producing some content, or a family member or friend, then it's starts to become a little bit easier to relate to, doesn't it? And I guess we have to realise that there's more and more people that are involved in the content process, and there are lots of livelihoods that are involved here. It'd be very interesting to actually put together the number of people in New Zealand whose livelihoods are directly tied to some form of media, whether it's something as every day as sort of the news, whether it's live sport, whether it's TV production, and then music, all of the other many areas that are sort of in between, with music and caterers that are looking after film crews and cleaners, and there's just so many jobs, and just looking locally that tie back to these things. And obviously the more piracy there is, then the pressure that sort of puts on across the sector.
That's exactly right. It's not just a big faceless corporation. It's actually individuals, and a lot of them are behind the camera, so you don't necessarily see them, but their roles are absolutely vital. And I've been along to some of our sports matches. We all take it for granted the way highlights put together. The talent of some of these guys and the speed with which they do stuff in their decision making is awesome. So that's what today is about, to have that conversation from our perspective. And I think it'll be really interesting at some stage, Bear, you mentioned blockchain, to kind of see how that will work, because maybe that for individuals will actually be a bit of a transitional moment. I know it's a little ways off, but it was really interesting that you mentioned that, because I have heard about it
probably
before.
Based on smart contract, so that individuals can sell their content.
They can control it, can't they?
They can control it. Yeah, it will be
get the benefit of their effort. That's what we like.
Much better future.
That's great. Well, we've run out of time for this episode, so we'll probably be keen to have you back, Bear, to talk a little bit more about China at some stage, because I know we had a couple of other things we were keen to chat about. So we'll have to do that again. And so thank you for joining the show. Now, if people want to follow you online, how do they track you down? Is it sort of Twitter, LinkedIn? Where are you easiest to contact?
The easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. So just search Bear Liu, BEARLIU, and you got me there.
Excellent. And Sophie, thank you very much for coming in.
I've got more, Paul, that I can share, so I might be back. I'll be banging down your door. And I'm only on LinkedIn in terms of social media, but, if anyone wants to email, they certainly can, or get in touch. Very happy to hear direct feedback too. So look, thank you very much for having me.
That's great. Well, it's been it's been good to have the conversation, and look forward to further engagement with Sky. Because realistically, you're absolutely key player